Hey, well, I want to just thank Dr. Gordon Pritz for joining me on This Stuff Matters, the podcast, and I appreciate you giving some time for this interview.
Sure.
And you have been a career educator, teacher, coach, administrator, highly influential on so many levels. And I just would love to go back to the whole beginning, the motivation for you. I actually read a quote one time I thought was pretty amazing. I think it was Confucius. He said something like, if your plan is for 1 year, plant rice. If your plan is for 10 years, plant trees. If your plan is for 100 years, educate children. And obviously,
Mm,
there's power in the educational process and the
right.
educational relationships. But I'd love to just hear you talk about what led you to give your career life to education.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate Tom this time and being able to talk candidly with you about life
Mm-hmm.
and just all that entails. But yeah, my path in education was interesting because my dad was kind of a he did some professorial work,
Mm-hmm.
teaching and that kind of thing, and then I had an older brother that went into teaching. My brothers were either missionaries or educators, it seems like in
Okay.
my family. So um, when I was in high school, I began working as a lifeguard in the summer.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that was teaching swim lessons. And it just seemed as if I had a knack. I don't know that I'll say a gift, but a knack for just, kind of finding the right motivation to get kids to learn something that was difficult or to try something that was scary,
Mm-hmm.
And so from that, I went on into college, and I got to that point in college where you kind of got to make a decision,
Right.
on what you want to major in. And
Yeah.
so I was still doing the summer lifeguard and swim lessons,
Yeah.
and so I thought, well, maybe education is where I need to be. I was in sports, so the coaching was something that also interested me, but not the key driver. So it was wanting to be a teacher, and so I went into it. Decided my going into my junior year to major in education and particularly elementary education. So I was a male in elementary education was a little bit unusual,
Mm-hmm.
and but I also wanted to coach, and I coached at the high school level. So I had a kind of an interesting mix there. But after college, went on into education
Mm-hmm.
and spent my career as a career educator, 40 years in
Yeah.
education before I retired.
That's incredible. That's near and dear to my heart. My mother was a career educator. My brother is still to this day a high school English teacher and coach. And boy, I know the impact that you have the opportunity to make. I know just the scratch the surface of the impact I know you've made and the lives you've touched over such a
Mm,
career. But I'd love to get just maybe your perspective also on the state of education, perhaps
yeah,
in
yeah,
America today, and there's so many factors to that. The
sure.
quality of learning and education that's happening and the challenge therein. Of course, it's there's political debates in and around
Yeah.
education too. I'd love to just hear you talk about where you think it is, maybe one or two big things that would be needed to enhance or make education in the
Yeah.
U.S. better.
Well, I would start by saying that, that saying that all politics is local.
Yeah.
Well, all education is local. I mean, it's your
Mm-hmm.
own school and your kids' experience, I think, that defines how you feel about education.
Hmm.
And if you have your child in a school where you feel like their needs are being met, they're being challenged, they're
Mm-hmm.
safe, of course, then I think people probably have a pretty good perspective or a feeling about their education their kids are receiving. So yeah, I think you have to take that into the thought process. But at the same time, we look at education across our country, and COVID did some things to
Right.
education. Looking back on it, we're all experts now.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of the way we handled it. Shutting down schools was kind of the thing we did, and um, I could have predicted at that time that's going to have some long term damage. or effects, maybe is a better word, on the kids. And I just know the social interaction, the discipline, the the whole idea of getting up and going to work as a student, very important. And a lot of that was lost. And on some young students, particularly kindergarten, first grade, second grade, those are key years for getting that foundation. That it's hard to say how that impacts them in the long run. Time will tell. I know there's a lot of effort to kind of catch that back up now, which is expensive and difficult to do. But the parent is the key, and the teacher is the key.
Right.
And if you have an involved parent and a dedicated, good, caring teacher, then I think you're going to have good outcomes, despite things like COVID. I know I watched my oldest son, who was an elementary principal, in his first year as a principal when COVID started, and he had a kindergarten. My granddaughter was a kindergartner right at that particular time, so I watched it firsthand. Fortunately, because he and his wife are very involved, she's caught up and been just fine. But not everybody's that fortunate, so I worry about that. But the key is the parent involvement and caring about their kids and making sure their kids are being challenged and cared for, and then the teacher in the classroom. Those are the keys. And in Georgia, where we live, and in the county we live in, I think we're in a pretty good situation. I don't know that I can say that about the rest of the country.
Right.
I have brothers in Colorado and Oklahoma and Florida, and so I see kind of what their kids and grandkids are going through. But it's concerning, and we need to be involved in it, and we need to, have a buy-in to it, and even me now as a retired educator, I should still be caring about it, involved in it, particularly because my grandkids, but because state of education in our country is important for our country's future. So,
Right.
So yeah, I've got concerns, but I look locally and I feel good about what I see, but I don't know that goes on everywhere.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe as important of a culture, societal, foundational element as anything else. Just how we do with our kids, educating them.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. So, and you've mentioned your family, your brothers, a couple times already. You're the fourth of five boys in your family.
Right.
A unique family makeup. Just in that context,
we share some commonalities, don't we?
I'm one of two boys.
Yeah. But dad's in the military.
Dad's in the military. That's right. Yeah. So right. So your father's a chaplain in the military, and you're traveling the world. Lots of different unique elements to the work that what formed and shaped you there. But I'd love to hear you talk about that. Talk about your family specifically. How did your parents, the kind of formative effect they had on you that stands out, that's significant to pass on, and your brothers too, I guess, in that process for kind of who you are and how you've lived your life.
Yeah. Well, my, as we've already said, my dad was in the Air Force. Prior to going in the Air Force, he'd actually didn't go into the Air Force till he was 33.
Wow.
And then he made it a career. He was a chaplain for 27 years. So all I knew was moving every 1 to 4 years, to a new base somewhere in the country or somewhere in the world. And to me, that was normal. And it was adjustments, all the time. But my mom was super strong with that. She was very positive. Every place we got an assignment to, she would get the map out and we'd get down on the floor and she'd get us all excited about the next tour we were going to, And so it was never like we looked back and regretted we were leaving. It was always looking forward and we can't wait to get where we're going.
Wow.
And so that kind of was my approach to life, changed it and bothered me. I always looked at it as a positive. And But at the same time, I didn't have that hometown roots kind of thing
Right.
like some of the kids I grew up with, because
Mm-hmm.
not every kid I grew up with was a
Mm-hmm.
military kid.
Mm-hmm.
But I wouldn't change it for anything.
Yeah.
I was born in England when my dad was stationed there. Started elementary school in Germany,
Mm-hmm.
um, and then did high school 4 years in Madrid, Spain,
That's
and
great.
threw in, Texas and Ohio and Alabama and New
Mm-hmm.
Mexico,
Mm-hmm.
all in between in there, and just it was interesting because I grew up in the mid 60s, early 70s,
Yeah.
the country going through the civil rights movement. But in a military school, I had the opposite experience. We were integrated. That was normal to me. My first experience with a segregated school was in junior high in
Mm-hmm.
Montgomery, Alabama,
Mm-hmm.
and I had just spent 7 years in elementary school with very diverse
Mm-hmm.
makeup.
Yeah.
And then when I went downtown Montgomery to junior high school downtown, segregated still,
Wow.
1967. I was going, "What's wrong with this picture?"
Right.
So I
Interesting.
had that experience, and then 2 years later, back overseas to a very integrated high school with just a very diverse makeup there. So it was back to normal for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I had that as part of my upbringing. That I learned about a lot of different people and races and ethnicities and countries, and so I had a wonderful upbringing in that regard. And so it really helped me when I went into my field of education because I'd had all types of kids and all types of teachers that I was charged with leading when I was into administration, and so just a great preparation that I had no idea what it was preparing me for, but it was the
Wow.
Lord
Mm-hmm.
working. And I look back on all that now, and I just think He was just charting the course,
Yeah.
and I had no clue what was going on,
Mm-hmm.
but it's amazing when you look back how that
Mm-hmm.
all worked. But yeah, I had three older brothers. They were 7, 8, and 10 years older than
Wow.
me, so they were big inspirations, role models in my life. My dad was a great role model for me. I always say I heard him preach on Sunday, and then I saw him live it out Monday through Saturday.
Wow.
And so it was a great growing up experience. My mom was super strong, probably the strongest woman I've ever known, and she was a rock. And my dad was off a lot, helping and doing other things. So my mom was a key. My brothers. So I learned the power of a role model,
Mm-hmm.
and through my dad and my brothers. And so when I got to that stage in my life, I had a younger brother who sometimes I probably wasn't a great role model to, because I picked on him a lot. He reminds me of to this day. But we did things together. We had some very common interests with sports and that kind of thing. So today we're very close,
Mm-hmm.
my younger brother and I. But yeah, I just had a great upbringing. Saw positive role models, and then I realized the power of the role model, and so that inspired me
Mm-hmm.
to treat that very carefully.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully, I did the same as I
Mm-hmm.
served and taught and coached and that type of thing. But you never know.
Right.
I've had those experiences where one of my former teachers or one of my former students will come up to me and see me after a long time and say, "I remember exactly what you said to me," and I just hold my breath and I just hope it was good, you know. And then they share something with me that was powerful in their life,
Yeah.
life changing in some ways, and I never even realized it. So that's really the power of
Yes.
a teacher and a coach and
Yeah.
an educator, is that you
Yeah.
you have those opportunities to make life changing experiences. And as I caution my teachers often, when I was a principal, you never know when that's going to be. So treat them all as
It's
those
that
type
moment.
that moment,
Yeah.
because you never know.
Right.
Yeah. So
Wow. And I want to talk about that in just a second, but just touch on your and a common link between us of the military background. You more so than me, but did you have a favorite place of all the different places you lived, like that stands out in your memory bank? Says, "Oh, I loved living there as a kid," or something.
wow. I don't know. I never really thought about it that way, but I know I liked them all.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like I said, my mom was one of the reasons why. We
Mm-hmm.
would she would take us places, we would do things,
Yeah.
in each place. So I'm not sure I had a favorite place. I had kind of some self pity with high school being overseas,
Right.
thinking I was missing out on something back stateside
Yeah.
because I was into sports. I played football, I wrestled, did baseball and track, and thought if I was back in the States, I would have had a lot better chance to do this or that at the college level. But it all worked out. I
Mm-hmm.
got to compete at the college level, and that went well for me and
Mm-hmm.
led me into the profession of being a teacher and a coach. And so I can't really say I had a favorite place. They all were different,
Yeah.
very different.
Yeah.
And sometimes we were in so short in one place, I'm not sure I had
Don't even
time to,
remember it.
yeah, to remember it very well. But very impactful,
Yeah.
all of them.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I'll tell a quick story.
Yeah.
When I went off to college, I went to a small Christian college in Indiana,
Mm.
Taylor University, and I'd never even been to Indiana. I was in Madrid, Spain when I was picking a college,
Yeah.
and so I had to actually went into my guidance counselor's office and I said I want to go to I think I want to go to a Christian college that has football and has wrestling. And she said, well, there's not too many of those. And I said, all right, well, and she had a book
Yeah.
from Taylor University
Yeah.
and the one from Wheaton College.
Yeah.
And so I looked at both of them and I applied to both and ended up going to Taylor.
Yeah.
The first time I was in Indiana was when my older brother drove me there and dropped me off.
Wow.
And so 2 years later or 3 years later, I meet my future wife there,
Wow.
and
Yeah.
she and I were talking one evening, and she says, my dad. I told my dad that you and I were dating, and I said, oh. He said, and he asked if your dad ever was in a quartet and sang, and I said, well, yeah, he did. And her dad would go to Pine Brook Summer Camp, a Christian camp in upstate New York. And my dad was in a quartet that traveled around the country, cut records, and with Percy Crawford, evangelist Percy Crawford,
Mm-hmm.
and so he would go into this camp every summer
Mm-hmm.
and sing.
Mm-hmm.
And her dad just couldn't wait for the quartet, the men's Church of the Air quartet, to come in and sing.
Wow.
And so when he learned that my dad was Ray Pritz, the guy in the quartet, of course I was in like Flint with
Awesome.
him,
Yeah.
and so it's interesting how that works, and the Lord put that together. But yeah, it's a small world, I guess.
I
But
love it.
yeah,
Yeah. But the adaptability, the ability to competently and confidently step into almost any
yeah,
context as a part of what you had to do growing
right,
up in that
right,
environment, it's an invaluable skill or gift or something that
yeah,
you pick up. That's awesome. All right, so back to family stuff. So
yeah,
your mom and dad, incredible. Your brothers, and now you. So you were one of five sons, and now you've raised four sons
mm,
to successfully to adulthood. That's just incredible to me. What would you say, you and Ginny, some of your key principles and practices in parenting, you specifically as a father raising boys, what were cornerstone for you that we can learn from?
yeah. Well, um, I know that I tried to be present a
Mm-hmm.
lot. I think that's important.
Mm-hmm.
You talk about quality time versus quantity
Mm-hmm.
time, and I think sometimes because the quantity time's not there, we make the quality time seem the key. and I'm not sure it always is. Quantity time is a good thing. Um, but because I was a teacher and because I was a coach, I often say I was raising other people's kids.
Yeah.
And that's where my wife stepped in and did a great job. She filled in the space, particularly in my high school coaching years, which was 18 years of that, in raising our four boys. I mean, we had four boys 6 and under at one point. We had four teenagers at one point,
Wow.
and we had four guys in the college years, almost, because they're all 2 years apart. So there were some critical times there, but we were, I tried to build a good teams in wrestling and football when I coached, and my wife and I tried to build a good team as parents, and so we had our roles. We knew that at times we'd have to pick up the slack for each other. She picked it up for me more than I picked it up for her, but we worked well together. We sacrificed. I was on a teacher's salary. She stayed at home with the boys, so we were working our best to make it. At times, but we never lacked for anything. The Lord always provided. It's amazing when I look back at how we were able to do that. But we did. But yeah, we worked hard together. We have different personalities, but we gel well. Her strengths are not mine, and vice versa. Um, she thinks out of the box a lot. I'm very analytical and very regimented, very disciplined. Learned that from growing up.
Yeah.
But we gave a lot. I can't say that we always gave what we should have, but we tried. And knew that discipline and raising the kids in the church was important, and so those were priorities for us. And our boys, went to church every Sunday for the most part until youth soccer starts and seems to cut into things.
Yep.
I'm sad to say, but we had some times where we just had to suck it up, as I say, and grow from it. Some trying times, but we made a lifelong commitment to each other when we got married, and nothing was going to get in the way of that. And even though there were things that tried at times, we worked together well as a team in raising the boys. And now it's fun being a poppy.
So you have 4 grandkids, huh?
We've got 4 grandkids.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, it's nothing like it. We and all our boys are right within 10-mile radius of us. That's right here, great. Which is amazing. So we get to see the grandkids a lot, get to take care of them a lot, and help out. And it's fun to watch, our boys be dads and husbands, and we still got one that's not married, but we're praying on that. But the grandkids are special. They really are, and I'm trying to be a better poppy than I was a dad, and that's not a bad thing.
Oh, that's awesome.
You learn a lot of lessons, going through, and things you do a little different. So that's what grandparenting's for, is to, give you another chance.
Give you that chance.
Yeah.
That's cool. I love it. And well, you're a Hall of Fame coach, and I know a Hall of Fame dad, and got to be a Hall of Fame grandpa. But tell me about you're mentioning, even in the parenting, this teamwork and the commitment that you and Ginny have. So 46 years, you said, that you've been married. What are some of the keys to that, to the longevity and the and working on and building a marriage that not only lasts but that can thrive for that period of time?
Yeah, like I said, we were and are a good team. We know that it's not a 50-50, compromise. You always kind of lose something. It's 100%, given to the other person, and that's easier said than done. But that's what we strive for, is trying to be supportive of each other. And you learn that your way is not always the best way, and and her way is not always the best way, but our way might be. So
Mm.
let's figure out what that looks like, and then kind of work together to get there. But just we put a lot of trust in the Lord the whole time, and
Yeah.
he provided for us time after time after time. It's
Yeah.
just humbling to look back on some of the things that we were blessed with or challenged with or dealt
Mm-hmm.
with.
Mm-hmm.
You know, raising kids is tough these days.
Mm.
It was tough back when we tried to raise ours, but you get through it, and your kids. Hopefully, your kids respond and
Mm-hmm.
become the young men and dads and husbands that you want them to be. And
Mm-hmm.
we're blessed to see that in all four of ours.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, you and Ginny, were there things along the way, maybe church involvement together, but other things that you did that kind of kept your focus where it needed to be, kept you on the same page spiritually? I mean, you guys spend time studying together, praying together. What were some of the just the dynamics along the way that were
Yeah.
helpful?
We, one thing that we did when I was coaching is we did FCA camp, Fellowship of Christian
Yeah.
Athletes camp in the summer.
Mm-hmm.
And we would take kids to
Mm-hmm.
camp, but we'd also take our boys.
Mm.
And so we would, every summer for 5, 6, 7 summers, I can't remember how many, we would spend a week together in Black Mountain, North
Oh,
Carolina,
wow.
and boys would get great exposure to role model athletes,
Mm-hmm.
and I would, Ginny and I would get time together as a couple, and
Mm-hmm.
it was always kind of a rejuvenating
Mm.
mountaintop experience type of thing that we always look forward to. Our kids, I think, really
Mm-hmm.
have fond memories of that, and so we did that. We had couples retreats in church that we tried to do,
Mm-hmm.
still try to do, uh, but uh, it's always tough,
Yeah.
setting that aside and finding that time, but very important. And do the best you can. Maybe not always like you should, but we tried.
Yeah.
And those moments are ones we look back on and see as important and
Mm-hmm.
key to building a stronger marriage.
That's incredible. That's helpful. And then obviously the role of sports in your life and development. Here you have this career as an educator and all the other arenas of impact you've had. How did the journey in your younger years as an athlete, whether it be football, wrestling, the other sports you did, how do you see, you know, that your involvement in sports kind of shaped you and formed your
Yeah.
approach to life, your success, maybe even?
Well, again, I come back to my older brothers.
Mm-hmm.
I remember one of those flashbulb moments in my life that my brothers created for me, and it was kind of a marker in my life for what motivated me or what drove me. I was 6 years old. We were at a big base picnic. I think it might have been 4th of July or something. My older brothers were there. They were having competitions and races and things like that, and they were having a 6, 5, 6, or 6, 7 year old race, and I was sitting back kind of watching, and one of my brothers said, "Hey, you need to get in there. You're fast. You can." I said, "No, I'm not going to race." And he said, "No, you need to get in there." And he kind of drugged me over there and put me in the race. Well, as fate would have it, I won the race, and I learned a lesson. You can't, if you don't get in the race, you're never going to win.
Mm.
And so that was kind of the moment for me that I just remember that as a driving
Mm.
force. To You just got to get in, take chances, and then the outcomes will be what they are. But if you don't get in the race, you're never going to know.
Wow.
So I did sports. Growing up, not real early in life, but I did. Middle school. I remember getting started in football, and got cut from the first team I tried out for, and just that charged me. How dare you cut me when I'm fifth grade?
Yeah.
But I was in Boy Scouts, worked hard there, had a great experience in the Scouts, and then Pee Wee football, as they called it
Yeah.
in Montgomery, Alabama, and then on into high school and did, you know, 4 sports in high school, and then on into college and did 2 sports in college.
That's amazing.
So I was very blessed to have strong careers in sports growing up, and then parlayed that into high school coaching,
Yeah.
and just learned, you know, it's all about discipline. It's a
Mm-hmm.
work ethic,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where I learned hard work pays off,
Mm-hmm.
and it may not always go your way, but you know. And so I got, as I had success, I got a little more confident all the time, but I also got humbled, you
Mm-hmm.
know, because I didn't always have success, you
Yeah.
know.
Right.
Football probably came a little easier to me than wrestling.
Mm.
um, so I would get my confidence up in football season and then get it brought back down in wrestling season, you know. But I think because of, I like to think that I did a good job coaching in both of them, but obviously I think the wrestling history may say that I was a little better wrestling coach than I was a football coach. But it's interesting because I wasn't, even though I was a college wrestler and did okay, it did well at times. I did learn some lessons about life. You know, I can always remember my college coach, who was a huge influence and role model, Tom Jarman. Coach Jarman's still with us today, but you know, I remember in the practices he would put us through, we weren't always happy with him because of the rigor and the intensity. And I can remember as clear as you know today that you'd be in a practice and you'd hear him yelling. You know, it's just one of those practices where people were crying and cussing and you know, those kind of things. And I could hear him saying, "I don't care if all you can do is wiggle. You better wiggle as hard as you can." Yeah,
That's great.
you know. And so you know, it's just the idea that no matter how tired you are, how worn out you are, you just got to give your best and try your hardest. And so that's kind of how I coached. That's kind of how I you know, served in the classroom. That was very important to me, to being a good teacher. And then when I moved into administration and I was a high school principal and a superintendent, you know, the same thing. I tried to be a role model. I
Right.
tried to demonstrate hard work and dedication and discipline, and
Yeah.
all learned from sports
Does
and from my parent, my dad, my mom,
it
my
translates so
brothers.
directly, doesn't it?
Yeah, it
Just into
does.
everything.
It does. You hear that a lot. It's very cliche, I guess, in some ways, but it's so true, you know. And I don't know that there's a whole lot of greater teachers than sports in some ways. And if you're somebody who wasn't in sports, you know, it's hard to understand that or believe that.
Mm-hmm.
But they also find things that
That's right.
motivate
There's
them.
other
You know,
types. Right.
whether it's the arts or
Right.
what I loved as a high school principal. I loved going to our high school musicals and
Yeah.
plays because those kids worked just as hard
Yeah.
and just as proud
Mm-hmm.
as the football team was or whatever.
Yeah.
And so, you know, you got kids got to find their niche and find their place to,
Mm-hmm.
you know, get them motivated. And for me, it was sports.
Yeah. And over the years that I've known you, I've enjoyed thoroughly the occasional time when you've shared with me a story of maybe one of the kids you coached along the way, and kind of you excited about and really you encouraged by having watched their path as adults. Is there one that you could share, you know, here that
Well, there's so many.
yeah.
I mean, and I'm blessed to hear from my former athletes, wrestlers, football players from time to time, and
Mm-hmm.
it always blesses my heart to hear how they've done and turned out, so to speak. But yeah, a lot of stories like that. I think one that um, and I'll try to keep it brief because it's a pretty in-depth story. But I had a young man who I had my eyes on to get out for wrestling since he was a freshman in high school because he just would have been a great wrestler in my opinion. He was a great athlete. Um, did multiple sports, but wrestling wasn't one of them.
Mm.
So I watched him in football as a ninth grader, and then in basketball as a ninth grader, and baseball, which was his big sport. And this young man, he he was a natural.
Mm-hmm.
But I also, after his freshman year, he decided to quit football
Mm-hmm.
and focus more on basketball and baseball. Um, After his sophomore year, he decided to quit basketball
Mm-hmm.
and focus on baseball.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that opened the door for me to talk to him because basketball was the same season as wrestling.
Yeah.
And so I went to him and I said, "Hey, why don't you come on out for wrestling and try it?" Just see. And this was his junior year, um, which is a little unusual for somebody to come out that late. And he was a big, strong kid, about 170 pounds. And so anyway, I got him out, and he liked it.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
he was a natural.
Yeah.
He was learning and picking up. He didn't start for us his junior year, but he was a backup, and he pushed our varsity wrestler right to the limit in wrestle offs. Well, so his senior year, he was going to fit right in as a
Mm-hmm.
starter and really a leader because he was. And he we got about 3-4 weeks into the season, and he could see that he was going to be a starter and a leader, and I think it frightened him.
Mm-hmm.
I think being confronted with
Mm-hmm.
having the spotlight on him was what kind of shied him away, and was really
Interesting.
when he dropped football. And that was part of the reason. Basketball, he dropped it.
Mm.
Used baseball as kind of, I want to focus on baseball as kind of an excuse, so to speak. And so he came to me after about 3 weeks and said, "Coach, I think I'm going to give this up. This is not for me."
Mm.
And it really, although I heard that from kids often in wrestling, because it's not for everybody, it's tough. This one kind of hurt me, and
Mm.
so I let it go for a couple of days, and then I went to him in the hallway a couple of days later. I said, "We need to sit down and talk."
Mm.
And so I said, "Why don't you come on in, after practice this evening, and
Mm.
we'll just talk about this." So he said, "All right, I will." So my thought is that he, like I said, he didn't like the spotlight,
Mm.
didn't like to be put in a position of
Maybe
leadership
it felt
and
like pressure on him or
pressure.
something. Yeah.
And so I sat down with him and I said, "Here's what I think." And I was very blunt with him. I said, "I think when you know the spotlight's going to be on you, you can't handle it."
Mm.
And I said, "I would bet that when you're in that on deck circle in a baseball game, that you just hope that batter ahead of you either hits the game winner or strikes out and ends the inning, so that you don't have that pressure on you when you come up. Or if you're out there playing shortstop, that you just hope that ball is not hit to you in this critical situation." I said, "I just think you have to learn to handle pressure and to engage it and really welcome it,
Mm-hmm.
to make you, who you really can be, because you're
Mm.
not even scratching the surface of where you can be." And I said, "You are welcome to back on this team anytime."
Mm.
I said, and I pulled out a baseball
Mm.
and I gave it to him, and I had signed it. And
Mm-hmm.
I said, I told him on the wall, I said something about, "You need to break down that wall that's keeping you from being as great as you can be, and have no fear."
Mm.
And I gave it to him. And I said, "Here's what I want you to do. I want you to take that baseball and put it in your bag you carry into the dugout." I said, "Every time you get in one of those situations, I either want you to pull that ball out or think about that ball and attack the situation." So sure enough, a couple days later, he shows back up. He says, "Coach, you nailed me."
Mm.
He said, "You're exactly," and I got lucky,
Mm.
he said, "That's exactly what I do." And I said, "You made it clear to me, and so I'm back out here, and you got
Wow.
me. You got me."
Mm.
And so he had a great year. We got into the tournament. He qualified for state. We were in a tight team race, and every point was critical. He had won a couple matches in the winners bracket, lost, and came down into the losers bracket. He was coming back through. He was in a tight match. He was down 4-0 with
Mm.
about 30 seconds to go. He had come out of bounds right by me where I'm sitting in the corner, and I could just see that look in his eyes that he's given up, that he's not going to win. And I said to him, I looked at him, and I'll say his name, Trey. I said, "Trey, think of that baseball."
Mm.
And his eyes just kind of went like that. And he
Mm.
charged back to the center. And in the last 30 seconds, I'm not making this up, he reverses the guy and puts him on his back and wins 5-4.
That's awesome.
And we end up winning the state championship by about 8 points, and he scored about 8 of those.
Wow.
But 12 points, and he scored about 8. So
Yeah.
it was just like a fairy tale ending. But
That's so great.
but about 2 years ago,
Ah.
and he sends me a picture of that baseball. Still got it.
Wow.
And he said, "Coach, I think about this a lot. Thanks for all you did for me." And it's just moments like that just makes it worthwhile. And he's a dad. He's got kids in sports, and I'm sure he's teaching them, about attacking
facing your fears.
Face your fears, and don't back away from it. And
that's so great.
And so just moments like that just make you realize, the Lord put you there for a reason. And
I love it.
And hopefully there's a lot of stories out there that I don't even know about like that.
Yeah.
But
thanks for sharing that one.
Yeah, it was
I love that. Wow, I hadn't heard that one. I've heard other great ones. That's a great one.
Yeah.
Well, let's wrap up, Gordon. You've mentioned the Lord and your faith throughout, but I mean, just you're obviously a believer in Jesus. I'd love to hear you talk about the role of Jesus' role in your life, how you came to put faith in Him, the way He's sustained or the difference He's made in your life. Just I don't know anything in that direction. I'd love to hear you talk about it.
Well, when your dad's the base chaplain at most places that you live, you got an automatic weight on your shoulders, so to speak. And sometimes when you're a kid, you make that weight bigger than it really is. But like I said, my dad was a great role model for me. I accepted the Lord in my bedroom with my mom in the 6th grade. And then in high school, decided to get baptized. My dad baptized me and my younger brother. And then in college is when I really, the foundation was really strengthened, I think, and where I saw other young men, strong Christian young men in sports, football, wrestling, great role models for me there. And college sports was, like I said, I did 2 sports. And so, I played football from, training up until 2 days started in July, and then football all the way to, November, and then right into wrestling, and then wrestling all the way to March. And so I questioned whether I should be doing all that, sometimes. I actually quit my sophomore year in college. Kind of like the Trey story. And I went home for Thanksgiving, and I knew I'd made a mistake. And so as soon as I got back, I asked Coach Jarman if he'd allow me back on the team, and thank goodness he did. And so, it's just a very difficult, football stress and pressure is a whole lot different than wrestling. Wrestling's got the whole dieting component to it, which, I cut a lot of weight my first 2-3 years in college. So I was coming down from my football weight to my wrestling weight. People didn't recognize me. I had 2 wardrobes of clothes, and probably not healthy, but it I learned a lot about what I could do and what I could take. And I wouldn't have got through any of that without just fully trusting the Lord and putting, all that, on the Lord as far as getting me through it. So I really learned that in the college experience. And then, when I went out into teaching and coaching, it was that role model that I had as a kid. I wanted to be that for other kids. And so that kind of drove me, and it was always the Lord directing me and leading me, or me trying to follow the Lord's leading. Not always easy, obviously, but I tried to be a role model. I was, like I said, involved in FCA. I, took kids to camp. Mac Powell, the singer of Third Day, was one of my students at McEachern. He was. He was a singer in FCA on Friday mornings up there, so stuff like that. But I learned, like I said, through the sports and about discipline and fully trusting the Lord to get you through good times and tough times.
Yeah.
And I've just tried to live my life as a way to glorify the Lord, and
Right.
it's challenging
Sure.
for all of us,
Right.
but that's just the way I've tried to live.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I appreciate you taking this time so much, Gordon, and thank you for this.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I appreciate it,
Yeah,
Tom. Thanks
thank you.
for all you do, and great being a part of your church here at Mars Hill as well. So
That's a great blessing to all of us. Thank you, brother.
thank you.
Uh-huh.